Welcome to the 7th video in our series ABG of the week. This is actually a continuation of case 6 that we discussed previously. And I promised you that I will show you how there is so much more in a blood gas report that as a consultant you need to take into consideration. Let's see what we discussed last time. Case number 6 was a 60-year-old diabetic male who was brought to the hospital with altered sensorium. And so we just had a short history. We looked at the blood gas at that time and said, this patient is on supplemental oxygen. The oxygenation wise, there is hyperoxemia, but the alveolar arterial gradient is normal. In terms of ventilation, the patient was hypoventilating because the PCO2 was high. And in terms of acid-base imbalance, we said that there was an acute respiratory acidosis, a high anion gap metabolic acidosis, and a metabolic alkalosis. The cause of the high anion gap metabolic acidosis we discussed could be DKA or HONK, hyperosmolar non-ketotic state, or now appropriately called as HHS, hyperosmolar hyperglycemic syndrome. The metabolic alkalosis could be due to vomiting, which is common in these patients, or could be hypovolemia, contraction alkalosis, from long-standing osmotic diuresis. Hypochloremia could also be contributing. The acute respiratory acidosis, we said, could be due to an altered sensorium itself. Since the alveolar arterial gradient was normal, we said this is central hypoventilation and maybe as a complication of HHS. We ended the lecture last time saying that as a consultant, we cannot be satisfied with just ending here. And there is so much more information that we need to gather, because as a consultant, we have the responsibility of picking up as much information about the patient that we can plan the best treatment and most appropriate diagnosis for this patient. Let's look at the other data that this report shows us. If you look at the sodium, we find there's a mild hyponatremia. You look at the serum potassium, there's hyperkalemia. You look at the serum chloride, there's hypochloremia, and we need to discuss the significance. We need to comment on the electrolyte pattern, that is the relationship of one electrolyte with another. The serum creatinine is elevated, so does this represent renal failure or diabetic nephropathy? We need to calculate the serum osmolarity, especially when the sugar is high. And finally, we need to conclude taking everything into consideration and refining the diagnosis and the treatment plan. So let's look at what we need to do. We cannot take data, especially the electrolytes, at face value. In the presence of high glucose, the serum sodium needs to be corrected for hyperglycemia. With the abnormal pH, the serum potassium needs to be corrected for the pH. You need to look at the serum chloride because it may be your clue to a metabolic disturbance. You need to comment on the relationship of the electrolytes with each other. You cannot look at a creatinine being elevated and say this is renal failure, and we will discuss this because you need to always calculate the urea creatinine ratio. In patients with high glucose or high urea, you need to calculate the serum osmolarity. And finally, you need to give a clinical conclusion, taking everything into consideration. So let's look at each one of them. Correcting serum sodium for hyperglycemia. In hyperglycemia, up to 400 milligram per deciliter, for every 100 milligram per deciliter increase in the glucose above 100, the serum sodium falls by 1.6 milliequivalents per liter. This would mean that if the patient's blood sugar was 400, the serum sodium would have decreased by 3 into 1.6, which is 4.8 milliequivalents per liter. And this can be roughly rounded up to 5 milliequivalents per liter. Beyond 400 milligram per deciliter, for every 100 milligram per deciliter increase in the glucose above 400, the serum sodium now falls by 2.4, which means that beyond 400, for every 200 milligram per deciliter increase in the blood sugar, serum sodium decreases by 2 into 2.4, which is 4.8. Again, can be rounded to 5 milliequivalents per liter. If you remember this, then correcting for high blood sugar becomes very easy, because we need to look at the blood sugar and divide it into 400 and then packets of 200 there. And for each of them, we need to add 5. So correcting sodium for a blood sugar of 800, 800 can be divided as 400 plus 200 plus 200, which means we need to take the given sodium and add to it 5 for 400, another 2 5s for 200, which means 130 plus 15 is 145 milliequivalents per liter. And so it becomes very easy to correct it without a calculator. So though there is hyponatremia in the report, really the serum sodium is on the upper limit of normal. Correcting serum potassium for pH. Now, in metabolic acidosis, for every 0.1 drop in the pH from 7.4, the serum potassium increases by 0.7 milliequivalents per liter. Now that means for a pH of 7.05, the serum potassium would increase by 3.5 into 0.7, that is 2.45 milliequivalents. You can round it up to 2.5. And so the corrected potassium becomes 5 minus 2.5, which is 2.5. On first glance, it looked like hyperkalemia, but the reality is the patient is already hypokalemic. And remember, when this person is going to be treated, he's going to be treated with fluids and insulin, both of which will drop your potassium further. And God forbid, if someone looked at the hyperkalemia and the severe acidemia, pH of 7.05, and decided to give this person soda bicarb, it would make situations even worse. So it's extremely important to correct the serum potassium for pH. Now calculate the urea creatinine ratio. Every elevated serum creatinine is not renal failure. If you look here, you'll find that while the creatinine has increased 2 times the upper limit of normal, the urea has increased much more than 3 times the upper limit of normal. This means that the urea creatinine ratio is actually high, and that is hypovolemia or pre-renal situation unless proved otherwise. Though there are other causes like patient being on steroids, a GI bleed, or a very high protein diet. But since these are uncommon and would be obvious, hypovolemia is the most common thing to think about. You only confirm renal failure if the increase in urea is proportionate to the increase in creatinine. And if you have a situation where the creatinine is disproportionately increased, you think about diabetic ketoacidosis and rhabdomyolysis. In this case, the urea has disproportionately increased compared to creatinine, and therefore this pattern favors hypovolemia and not diabetic ketoacidosis. We need to calculate the osmolarity, especially when the sugars are high, and the osmolarity is twice the sodium plus glucose in milligram per deciliter upon 18 plus BUN upon 2.8. But if instead of BUN you have blood urea, you can divide it by 6, and this gives us an osmolarity of 325, which is hyperosmolar. So far, what we have seen is where we thought that there is hyponatremia, there was no hyponatremia. Where we thought there is hyperkalemia, there was in fact hypokalemia. We looked at hypochloremia. Now, you know that in blood gases, hyperchloremia is associated with the normal anion gap metabolic acidosis, which is also called hyperchloremic metabolic acidosis. So hypochloremia, which is just the opposite, is associated with metabolic alkalosis. And it may be our first clue to metabolic alkalosis, which this patient has anyways. Now you need to comment on the electrolyte pattern, and what I mean by this, and you will learn more in the series on Sherlock Holmes' approach to data interpretation in the ICU, but normally the sodium, potassium and chloride go in the same direction. So if they decrease, all of them decrease. If they increase, all of them increase. And what you see here is that the sodium is decreased but the potassium has not, in which case this is known as a low sodium high potassium pattern, and this is common in 3 conditions: diabetic ketoacidosis, renal failure, adrenal insufficiency, and of course certain drugs can cause this. So DKA is possible, renal failure we thought is possible, but we saw that the urea creatinine ratio was high. This was not a feature of renal failure. So this could point to diabetic ketoacidosis. We also found that the creatinine which was elevated is not due to renal failure, is due to hypovolemia. We saw this is an hyperosmolar state. So far, so good. And now we come to the final part, which is a clinical conclusion, taking everything into consideration. So now, is this patient who has come with unconsciousness, does he have DKA, diabetic ketoacidosis, or does he have hyperosmolar, it is HHS, there's a typing mistake, hyperosmolar hyperglycemic syndrome, or HONC. And this honestly was confusing even to me, because when you look at the pH, which is 7.05, you think this is DKA. Then you look at the bicarbonate, which is not so low, it goes in favor of HHS. The osmolarity is somewhere in between. So we need to understand what are we dealing with. Why is it important to know what we're dealing with? Well, the treatment is not the same. In DKA, the main treatment is insulin, and fluid replacement also is important. Whereas in HHS or HONC, it is predominantly fluid replacement which is important, and insulin is of secondary importance. Because of the very unusual acute respiratory acidosis, which is not a feature of DKA or HSS, I wanted to know what the pH would be if we have eliminated the acute respiratory acidosis. Now, let me warn you, this calculation, if you find it confusing or if this is going to confuse you, please ignore it and go on to the next slide. You can just ignore it. But I did this more for myself, that if I wanted to know the bicarbonates of 16 more favoring HHS, I wanted to know whether pH, which is so grossly against HSS, what would it have been? So to do that, I wanted to remove the component of acute respiratory acidosis from the pH. I said, let's assume this is a normal ABG to start with, and this patient developed a metabolic acidosis. His bicarbonate fell to 60. These are rough, crude things just to give an idea. So I said, suppose the bicarbonate, he developed just a metabolic acidosis to begin with. His bicarbonate fell by 8. Expected PCO2 would fall somewhere between 28 to 32. And so if we take it as 30, now the expected pH for a drop of bicarbonate to 16 would be a drop by 0.15. So 7.4 minus 0.5 is 7.25. This is what it would have been close to before the acute respiratory acidosis component developed. Now, if it developed acute respiratory acidosis, the PCO2 increased from 30 to 60. It wouldn't be 40 to 60, 30 to 60. And the pH would drop by 0.08 for every 10. So this will be, it would drop by 0.24. And I would get a pH which would be close to 7.01, which we have, 7.05. So to me, this seems to be a fair assumption of what would have happened to this person. And it also tells me that if you remove the acute respiratory component, acidosis, the pH would be somewhere around 7.25. So now, are we dealing with DKA or HSS? This is a table taken from Harrison's Principle of Internal Medicine, 19th edition, which tells us what are the differences between diabetic ketoacidosis and hyperosmolar hyperglycemic syndrome. So let's see where we fall. Glucose 250 to 600 in DKs, HHS more. In our case, it's 800. It fits here. Serum sodium is 130. Though corrected is 145, we take what is actually there and not the corrected value. So it is 135. Serum potassium can be normal or increased. So it goes here. Osmolarity is 325. It is neither here nor there. So I'm putting it somewhere in the center. Ketones were not done. The bicarbonate was 16, which is very close to 15. So it goes in favor of DKA. The arterial pH, I'm not going by 7.05. I would take 7.25, which was my predicted value removing the acute respiratory acidosis was 7.25. It still favors DKA. The PCO2 we ignore because that's a separate pathology. And the anion gap, this was the clincher. And that's why I put 2 ticks. The anion gap here was 20. It was a very high anion gap. And therefore, looking at everything, this patient's high anion gap metabolic acidosis was not due to HS, but due to DKA. It doesn't end here. Very alarming thing is, why is the PCO2 60? Neither DKA or HHS is associated with hypercarbia. For this, we had to ask the person who brought the patient, because this 60-year-old man was living all alone. There was no one to attend to him. And he was incidentally found unconscious and brought by the neighbors. So we don't know how long he had been unconscious. And to me, this appears to be a pre-arrest situation where now he's gone into respiratory muscle fatigue. And if he's not immediately intubated and ventilated, he is going to die within minutes. So do you understand that just like we analyzed in the last week's video, acute respiratory acidosis, high anion gap metabolic acidosis, metabolic alkalosis is grossly inadequate as a consultant. It doesn't tell us the urgency of intubating this person if we're going to save him. It doesn't tell us that the potassium is actually not high but low, and you shouldn't start this person on insulin without also starting potassium replacement in the form of KCl drip. And if for that matter, you shouldn't even start insulin immediately. You need to give at least a liter of fluid first and then start your insulin. And then as you start insulin, at the same time, start the person on KCl drip, because the corrected potassium is very low and in no time will the potassium crash. And we realized that there was no renal failure. This was purely hypovolemia. And that is why I said we need to first give this person fluid, at least a liter or so, and then start the treatment. What did we learn? That apart from the oxygenation status, ventilator status, and acid-base status, as a consultant, we must correct for sodium whenever there is hyperglycemia. We must correct for potassium whenever the pH is abnormal, whether it is acidemia or alkalemia, both ways it needs to be corrected. You need to look at the chloride only in glance, because it may be a clue to metabolic acidosis or alkalosis. You need to comment on the electrolyte pattern, which is the relationship between the electrolytes. Are they all going down? Are they behaving abnormally? Calculate the urea creatinine ratio always. Never do the creatinine without doing the urea. If you have a high sugar or a high urea, then always calculate the osmolarity. And finally, give a clinically meaningful conclusion to your diagnosis and to your treatment. I hope you liked this video. I certainly enjoyed it. And if you have friends who are interested in critical care, please do not hesitate to share this video with them. Share it with everyone. Knowledge is best shared. And if you're new to this video, please click on the subscribe button and the bell icon so that whenever a new video is uploaded, you will be informed. Take care, be safe. See you in the next video.